Cool. It says we're live. Let me check, make sure it's showing up for us. I see your beautiful faces. We are good to go. Welcome, everybody. I have an amazing guest for you for this first episode of the Money series. And his name is Ben Rossow, and he's going to introduce himself in a moment. And just to give you an idea of what to expect here, Ben's going to be sharing a lot about his journey to what helped him create multiple thriving businesses. And part of what happened along the way was some experiences with debt, bankruptcy. And the cool part is these are the things almost nobody talks about, especially in entrepreneurship. And so many entrepreneurs are putting on this facade that everything's growing great. And meanwhile, in the background, they're investing all this money, going into debt, hoping things will pay off. And Ben, through his experience, discovered it went even beyond the money of the important things that you need to look at in your business. So if you find that you are putting a lot of money into your business or you are dealing with bankruptcy, this is going to be a great place to learn from Ben in terms of what he experienced, what some of the warning signs are, and as well, what are the things that helped him create the thriving business? What are the things that he decided to shift that actually transform his life? And so, Ben, I know that was a banger of an opener. So I'm gonna let you just introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and where people can find you, because you are a master in what you do in your field, and so everyone deserves to know you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, I guess I thank you for having me here. It's been a huge, long journey. For anyone that doesn't know, I've known James for many, many years. He's my coach way back in the day, and so that's kind of what kind of at the turn of events with my business and things like that. But I help specifically cell phone repair shops develop systems to create their businesses into tools that they use to enhance their lives. Like that's really our main thing. Also, I do have a brick and mortar cell phone repair shop. We do computer repair, cell phone repair, all those types of things. But that's what I do as far as what would you consider like the work life. As far as like home life, I have a wife and then 3 beautiful children, and they all range from like 2, 5, and 8. So they're all pretty little. And but yeah, that's that's just a little bit about me as far as like what I do, and kind of give you like a frame of, I guess, who I am in a way, like my family life and things like that. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's wonderful. And for anyone watching, even though Ben's business is very niche, specifically with the repair shops, what you're going to find here is he's sharing this, some of the challenges that he went through, and also the things that really helped him in his business, are applicable to almost whatever your business is. And so that's just something to be open to. I like this idea of showing up with an empty cup. And so for anyone that's watching, really, really do that, because it's going to be about translating this over to what you're doing. So I'd say let's start with, if we just start in the beginning, where I think a lot of entrepreneurs start. It sounds like you had a business, you'd started it, and things were going along, and at some point you started, I imagine, putting more money into that because you wanted to do better. Could you just open up to where you were, and then in terms of what happened along the way that you thought, I'm going to put some more money into this?
Yeah. So I want to kind of reiterate like what you had mentioned before. Like my niche is repair shops, but realistically, any kind of small business or any kind of entrepreneur, I think at realistically any level kind of has a very, very similar experience, or at least like the confusion of the mindset, or like the cliche phrases that a lot of people hear. And so like back in like 2012 is when I first opened up my repair shop. We had kind of started. I worked at AT&T for a couple of years. Working at AT&T for those couple of years, we had seen a bunch of broken phones, and so I started fixing them on the side. Actually taught my wife how to fix them, and then so I would just give people my wife's business card, and she would fix them out of her grandfather's tax office because she was a secretary there. And And so it kind of grew our business, and we're like, hey, this actually seems pretty awesome. Like I always wanted to have my own business growing up. My dad was really big into, we'd actually ask like, hey, what's an allowance? He's like, an allowance is what you earn with a lawnmower. So, he bought us a lawnmower, and like all throughout high school, we had a big trailer, commercial equipment. Like we had a pretty decent operation, especially for high school aged kids. But so it's always kind of like the entrepreneur journey of like creating your own money. But yeah, so I jumped into iPhone repair pretty early on. After like 3 years of working at AT&T, I started doing that full time, and we opened up our first repair shop. But I think especially in the beginning for myself, like you see the business grow, and like that first month, you go to the next month and your revenue doubles, and you're like, well, that was pretty insane. And then the next month it doubled again. And so like, they were pretty small numbers in the very beginning, a couple $1,000s, but it went from like 5 to 10 to 15, pretty quickly. But over that whole journey, I think at least in the very beginning, you look at, your family and things like that. And I had my wife at the time, we didn't have any kids. And I was like, this is my time to really put in the work so it pays off later. And so you don't pay attention to like the amount of hours you're putting into the business because your wife is there alongside you. So 10 o'clock rolls around, you're like, oh, we haven't eaten dinner. Let's go get a pizza. So you get a pizza, go crash back at the repair shop, fix a bunch of phones all through the night. And you kind of create this whole cycle of where the business is massively dependent on you, and your whole personality kind of revolves around it. And you kind of lose like the whole aspect of, yourself in it, which is good because it does help grow the business. But at the same time, like I found myself in a place like where, the honeymoon phase was strong with the business. There was nothing I would not do for the business. And I dumped all my money back in and paid myself scrimps because we didn't go anywhere because we worked 6 days a week anyway. Like,
Right.
and we're young. So we're like, oh, it doesn't matter at this point. We don't have kids. And so that was really where we're at in the very beginning, at least. But there's more to that. But I'll kind of stop there just in case you have any questions or insight or anything like that. But that's kind of where I was in the very beginning for the first couple of years, is just, in that cycle of always being there in the business, and just dumping literally every last dollar that I had back into there to fulfill the phrase of, you got to reinvest your profits. But I'm like, I don't think I had profits. They're just like, it was just a churn. but yeah. So.
Yeah, well, I think you did a great job, opening with that, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, they do have a skill, they do have something that they thrive at, and especially when it's just them, it's amazing to see that money coming in, and as it grows, as the more investments come in from people, they're spending more time with their business. It's a thing that really can allow them to leapfrog or transition from, being in a regular 9 to 5 or doing something that they don't like. And like you said, it's really easy to really have that thing become your life or your time, or you're spending a lot of your effort there. And so I know there's a few people watching that I've spoken with who have, whether they're working from home and that's how they spend their business, or a shop that they're going into. I think that's a common thing that surrounds their time. And so, yeah, I mean, you can take it from there in terms of, where you were spending, where you're spending your time, and the things that I think what could be helpful, I know I'm kind of rambling for a moment as I'm thinking this through, but ultimately, you were receiving income and it was helping you and you were spending more time there. It sounded like as business picked up, you had some choices to make of how you wanted to grow that or accelerate that. And it sounds like some of it was investments, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So no, I appreciate that. The especially in the beginning, you look at everything and it's going so well, especially that first, sprint. I think you're just so in love with it, and like all your family understands, like, oh, you're not going to be available for that amount of time because like, oh, they just started a business, and so it's very easy to just kind of become like that recluse, to kind of step away and put all your time into it. Which, for myself right now, sometimes people ask me like, well, how much do you work, or like, what is your family life balance? And I just respond 100. Like that's literally what it is. I do 100% in both, but the time dedication in each is different. But I think at that time, especially, like it was 100 and 0. Like that's kind of how it was. It was 100 at work, and work was just my whole life. Which, I think there's a balance there. But after a while, we trying to think this through, because this to make sure I get all the steps right, because it's been quite a while since I went through it. And also, I think one part of it, and I know I've talked with you about this, James, is like with going through the experience of like actually having a business that crashes, actually having a business that didn't turn out the way you wanted it to be, like all those thoughts, you kind of like throw them, in the trash. And you're like, I don't want to think about that again. And it becomes like this whole, a deep pocket of memories that you're trying to repress. But
Yeah.
after the first, I would probably say we had hired on pretty quickly. Maybe after about a year or two, we brought on someone into the business, and and they had a little bit of like previous experience, which I hire totally differently now. But they had experience, and so when we brought them on, there was the whole aspect of, okay, cool, you kind of know what you're doing, just kind of do it, and bring up transactions with me, and we both kind of hustle together inside of the business. And then we hired on two more people. We had a pretty thriving eBay store at the time where we're literally selling like handful of phones each week, which was a massive you know. It was a pretty awesome revenue maker for us. But also at the same time, we were doing really well with revenue, which I was like, you know what? I am reinvesting it all back in. I'm not really taking much as a paycheck because I don't necessarily need to. And because of that, I had started to like drain some of my savings because I'm like, oh, I'll drain it because the business is going so good. I'll be able to get it back within a year anyway, so easily. And also you got to dump money in to make money. But, so I dumped money in as far as to buy inventory, to make the store look better. And pretty soon we had 3 employees, and I would say I thought we were doing decently at the time, but then our eBay store got banned, for one, because I didn't have the proper systems in place to ensure that we weren't duplicate listing things, and we'd actually gotten broken into like the month before, which we had a lot of those phones that got stolen. They had actually sold on eBay, and that will hurt your seller rating, and we got shut down because of that. But that was like the first hint at the time that I didn't really have systems in place. But because I didn't really have an eBay store anymore to run, it didn't really matter. So that employee actually they actually quit. I guess they felt so bad about it, they actually quit and went and did their own thing for a while. But in that process, I was like, well, the next step that I have is I built the business up to this point. I put all my time into it. I want to go get a bigger location. So we started to look for locations around town, and we found one. And then, and we eventually, moved into that. But the rent was triple. And of course, all the other extra expenses. The whole showroom was huge. It was like a 3,000 square foot store. So to outfit it, it was a pretty big ordeal. But during that time, in order to open up that second store, I actually had my 401k that I hadn't touched from AT&T. I rolled it over into like an Edward Jones account, and there was like $62,000 in there. And so in a matter of literally like a month and a half, I'd already spent like $50,000 of it on random inventory, on all things like that. And the biggest kicker with moving into that new store is, you're on this big high of growing your business. I remember I had, just in the whole mix of things, moving the cash drawer to the new store, I had accidentally taken the cash out of it and then deposited it into the bank account. And then so when we get to the new store, we opened up on a grand opening day, and everyone's like, hey, where's the cash? I'm like, oh crap, I accidentally deposited it. So I went to the bank, and I couldn't get any money out of the ATM because my account was $1,500 in debt, even after dropping $50,000 out of my 401k in there, plus everything else got tied up in all the other expenses. And so that was like the first indication. My first day in the new shop, I was $1,500 in debt in my bank account. I have like 3 employees just standing around, like wondering what to do at this point because we can't get cash. So I like found cash at home and put it in the cash drawer. But that was, I guess I'll pause there. But that was like the next step that I was into. I thought in order to grow, I had to, change the physical location or do things like that. And so I took a massive leap of, tripling all my expenses and draining all my accounts. And then pretty soon I was sitting there with $1,500 in the hole in my bank account. I couldn't even get cash out for a grand opening day. So,
Yeah. So really what what I'm hearing through this is, things were going well and you wanted to grow, you wanted to look at another location. There were some, there were some hiccups that you shared related to the eBay store and some different things that happened that you're like, oh, I don't have some processes for these things. Meanwhile, because things are going well for the most part, you're looking at opening another location. But what was really happening on the back end is because you were investing so much money back into the business, you were having to pull more from different stuff like your 401k and other things because it didn't, if you're investing it into the business, but not really paying yourself as much as you could, it's not making it possible for you to build your savings at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, in just the, I'll say like chaos of like, opening up a new place and managing all these different things, there ends up being like the over withdrawal of money and then the deposit of some other things. So when it comes to the opening, the money in the drawer was missing, so you had to scramble to grab some from home. And that, it sounds like for you that was an indicator of like, something's going on here. What would you say was an indicator of for you?
Well, I think that was the first moment that actually hit me that the business wasn't really doing as well as I thought it was, because you like kind of live on this whole high of the honeymoon phenomenon or whatever with the business, where you've given it everything, and despite it not giving you anything back, you're just so like it doesn't matter at that point. You want to give it everything that you can regardless of the return, because you absolutely love this thing. You saw it from infancy all the way up, and so you're like, oh, I want to make it better. So you go to get a second look or get another. We moved that location later on. We opened up a second location, which I'll have that's a whole story on its own. But yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I remember standing there and thinking as well, now whenever I look at myself with the business, I remember thinking, I don't want to micromanage anyone. I don't want to make anyone feel like uncomfortable while they're here. So I'm going to hire very qualified people that can kind of just do their thing. But the problem at that point, it then becomes very difficult to correct anyone, because you've already given them the expectation that they already know enough. You already hired them because they do. And the second that you start stepping in to like further, their development, they look at that as micromanaging. They look at it as super abrasive, and they look at it as offensive almost, because they're like, hey, I don't know why you're now talking to me as if I don't know what I'm doing. Even like, and I was super nice, even though I was being super nice, it just isn't received well. And it 100% my fault as far as not having the expectation set, or like, the system set to allow for that. But especially when you're in a point where at that point I was scrambling. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my first month's rent because I don't have money in the account. And that's $3,300 amongst everything else. And then you're sitting there, and grand opening day, like people want to be talking with customers and just kind of like eating cupcakes and all that kind of stuff. And then we still had devices coming in to be fixed. I remember a lot of like with 3 employees, I think at the time there, that they were kind of like dodging the repairs. They're like, I don't want to like repair it. I don't want to have to sit in the back and like be away from the party kind of thing. And I remember thinking, man, what could I have done differently to make them feel empowered to actually want to do that? Because that's what they've been hired to do. Like that's their expertise. But I think it was a big positioning on my side where I'd really just hired on a bunch of, in a sense, like business hustlers in a way that like probably would have started their own business, but I convinced them to come, work inside of my business. And that became the very difficult thing. And I think they could see the writing on the wall from the very beginning that the money wasn't happening as good as it should have, because there were some things in the store that we had not finished yet, like some displays, and we didn't finish them ever in that store. And it was because we didn't have the cash for it. And of course they see everything that's coming in. And so I think, once they start to put 2 and 2 together, the business is not doing as well as it is. And then on top, you come over to like, try to train them or do something else. They're like, oh, they're only doing this because their business is failing. If their business wasn't failing, they wouldn't be on my back all the time. And so it becomes like this huge like case of mutiny that's eventually going to happen. And that's really where I felt myself. I literally felt that I couldn't speak with any of my team members in a way to like, train them. And in that whole cliche of where people say, oh, employees are so difficult to deal with. They'll always give you kickback. They'll always do this. They'll always do that. You just have to deal with it as a boss. You just have to find ways to like almost babysit them. And I remember thinking that, I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me, but I guess I'm in this position. I don't know anything else to do. So I guess I'll just be kind of like the hands-off mediator, make sure no one's doing anything too bad. And then we'll just kind of go day by day and hope it works. And so that's what I did for literally years. And it obviously didn't work, but that's where I found myself at that point, where didn't have any money, try to train them to let's become better organizations so we can get money. And It was just a clash of expectations. That's really what it was. It wasn't like, they were wrong. It wasn't I was wrong. I mean, of course I was wrong. I built the whole thing wrong, but it wasn't anything like where anyone was doing anything to necessarily hurt each other. It was just a conflict of expectations. So no one knew, we weren't speaking on the same wavelengths ever. And so it was always very like micro abrasive with each other. And I think that was like one of the first steps that I'd seen where the business wasn't doing well. And I was scrambling to try to make it back. And then pretty soon I just kind of gave up, and it's like, well, I guess I'll just kind of exist and hope it gets better. And so.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you really painting the color there of what the experience was like, and really those details. Because I think a lot of people can relate to it. I don't know if you can see it on your end, but we've had some people commenting, and they're sharing their experiences of really going to invest money back into their business and dealing with some issues there. And so, I want to make sure I take into account like the time as well that we're on here. And so it sounds like those things started to build. Just you don't want to be the bad person, but you also don't want to be the babysitter. But you also recognize it's your responsibility to take care of these things and mediate in case anything needs mediation. And so, if you're open to highlighting, and as much as you want. Because I can go here for a while. What would you say are the things that started to compound, I guess, in a sense? Or what are the things that you noticed? If you want to continue sharing your story, you're totally welcome to. I just want to make sure we also have enough room for to share like those discoveries, so we can help people with some steps that they can take.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think some of the biggest red flags for me was, the inability to, no matter which way I tried, no matter how nice or mean or whatever I was, and I always was thinking, I'm not being rude, I'm just being direct. So that was like on my mind. I'm like, I just have to tell him directly. Like, whenever you feel like there is that wall between you and your team, then that's a huge red flag. Like, and that's, one of the biggest problems I think that I see in especially small business, like retail locations. It's literally like all the team members are not on the same team as, the owner, and vice versa. The owner's not on their team either. It's two entities working against each other, and they're just trying their best to mediate with one another, which I'm like, you can be one in the same with each other and totally thrive. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I saw is, I truly don't think that it was just very hard to train them. Like, I couldn't bring anything up. It was always just kind of like you can always tell it was just like, and you try to hold meetings and things like that and share things, and then things don't ever happen. I think that's a really big one too. But also at the same time, I look at myself now, I'm like, we have immense like success and immense action being taken by our team members. And for one, we have hired very, very awesome people. But for two, we built an incredibly awesome, transparent system for them to be able to utilize, so that they're able to know each and every single step to have success. And I think that can bring a lot of empowerment with them. But yeah, especially if you find yourself always, I look at this a lot with people in business. Even today, where someone had commented on a Facebook post where they're like, up to this point, I've just been reinvesting all my profits back into the business. I'm like, hold on, I think we need to get really clear with what we're even calling those, because they're not profits. That's literally a need that your business has to have in order to stay alive. And it's not growing it. It's literally just keeping it from dying. And those aren't profits. They're only profits if you could have had the full choice to take them and put them in your own pocket and not have died. If not, they were an expense. And so I think that's the big thing that we get confused with, especially with brick and mortar, because for one, transactions are a little bit less per, profits less per, plus we have all the extra overhead. And so, usually you have like this big, like almost 80-20 split of like expenses versus actual profit, which is a huge offset versus like online business. And so I think, that is a very hard thing for people to identify with. But it got to the point where eventually I had a Discover card since I was like 18, and I had actually started throwing a lot of my stuff on there, because it would get to the point where I'm like, in order to make payroll, I have to start doing parts orders on my Discover card, which I'm going to go ahead and pay off. It'd be totally fine. I never actually planned to start only making the minimum payment on it. But very soon, within like a month or two, I was like, I have to. And you create this constant need of needing credit, needing debt. And then you create a very good business system around that, where the business is operating 100% perfectly in the aspect of always needing to consume debt. And that's what I had created. And I was like, why can't I get out of this? It's because I've created a perfect system that was doing exactly as it was designed to do, which was to utilize debt and to pay off the minimum. And that's like where all my perspective was, which it became very, very difficult at the time. And I had really good credit for a long time. So like I could go and get like my Discover card had $14,000 limit on it. And we used my wife's, which had a $7,000 or $9,000 limit. Opened up a Citi card, immediately got $6,000 on there. And then I pulled some PayPal loan builders, which I got like, how much was that? Like $40,000 on one of those, $25,000 on another one. So like, I was able to just pull credit like all the time and get all these things, which I felt at the time, because everyone says you got to, take out loans of credit, to grow your business. I was like, hey, at least I'm doing something right for once. But paying the minimum, it was awful. It was pretty crazy. I was paying $7,000 a month in just the minimums on credit cards. That did not include payroll, which was another like $5,000 per month or so, $6,000, plus another rent, which is $3,300, plus all my other things. And so that was just the minimum on credit cards is $7,000 a month. And pretty soon I was looking, I'm like, I'm successfully paying like all these minimums, but it was because I was taking on a lot of debt.
Yeah.
But it became very discouraging at that point. I was like, man, like I'm too deep at this point,
Yeah, and so, and I also want to make sure we're highlighting your story. So I appreciate you giving I really appreciate giving those pointers, and people are really appreciating the perspectives because I think they experience these things, and so you had opened the larger space, and then where along the line did you open the second space? Because I imagine. These are the things that started compounding, where you needed to take out some of these other things for parts and different things like that. Is that right?
Yeah. So I had actually, so I was massively in debt when I opened up the second store, and especially with brick and mortar locations, there's this phenomenon of where your business is not working at all, and all of a sudden you think a second location is literally going to be like the magic wand to fix it all. Like I've seen this multiple times where people will open up a second location and they can't put anything in it because they don't have any cash. They negotiate a bunch of free rent from the landlord. That's exactly what I did. I went to this really awesome location, and that location was like, it was $2,250. It was pretty expensive. So at that point, I have like over $5,000 worth of rent that I got to pay for my business. But I negotiated 6 months free rent. I also negotiated. I didn't want to pay any kind of deposit or anything like that, and they were like, "That's been vacant." And so we got in with literally zero down in that spot. And literally what I didn't have any money to outfit it. So I just started taking things off of my shelf and hanging them on the shelves at my new store. So I just split my inventory in two, which then put less inventory at each. And then I just split my staff between the two stores, which, thinking about it, I'm like, well, if I didn't have to increase any staff. I had too many people in the first place. If I would just reduce the amount of people I had. And at the whole time, I only opened up that second location because I could tell that everyone hated me. Like, I was like, everyone in my business, like, they don't like being here. Maybe this will help them, see that I'm actually a good business owner. Maybe it'll make them like me again. So I opened up that second location, and then, put two people over there. And in that process, we never actually paid the rent there ever. And we went like a couple months after our 6 months. And so, and the funny thing was, I was so afraid to contact the landlord because I wasn't paying rent. There was actually the air conditioned trap dried up, and that was the same one that for the plumbing for the toilet. And so the store reeked like a porta potty. And so of course nobody wanted to go there. But I was so terrified to call the landlord that I didn't know what to do. And so it just stunk for the whole time. But that was because I had no money. But I opened up that second location because I thought everything was going to get better. But obviously it didn't. And I had to use more credit cards to, outfit that place and do things like that. And also to cover payroll between the two, which was awful at that point. But yeah, I opened it after I had been super in debt. But before I'd opened it, I remember going to CTIA, which is a big wireless electronics expo kind of thing out in Vegas. And I remember filling up a credit card, I think with like $7,000 worth of expenses that I had bought things out there thinking it was going to improve everything, with just all the vendors that, I was gullible enough to buy into their stuff and do all their big old packages for the big discounts they're giving. And so I came back $7,000 more in debt, never implemented or sold anything that I had bought there because I was too stressed anyway to put it into the business. And after that failed, then I was like, well, I got to open up the second location. So that's what I did. I was like, hey, that expo, totally, I didn't do the right thing with it. So now I need to go open up a second location. That's where I was at that point. But the funny thing was, I don't think anyone even realized that my business was failing. At that time, my brother messaged me. He'd actually opened up a business and then he closed it a couple months later because he was like, man, this thing's not making money. He was smart enough to close it. But he messaged me. He was like, hey, man, just want to say how proud of you I am because you're the only brother that has like opened up a business and kept it open, man. Like, you're doing great. Like, I'm so proud of you. I'm like, bro, if only you knew, like, I'm not paying any of my bills. Like, and so I didn't tell him that, but yeah, it was like the biggest irony at that point to get that message from my brother, but it was like during the depth of it all. But yeah, so yeah, that's the reason why I opened up that second location at least.
Yeah. And I really want to acknowledge you and for anyone listening to acknowledge you, Ben, because it takes a lot of courage to share this because these are the things that a lot of people experience in business that they don't talk about, they're afraid to talk about, and then people that aren't in business don't realize that these are common experiences and common things and a common thought process. And so I'd say I feel like it's kind of, sometimes in the online space, there might be someone who creates an offer and it doesn't work, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to create a second offer and then a third offer, and hoping that the next one is going to work, and investing in, sometimes they're just looking for the strategy, right? The thing to save them, when it's usually a compilation of different things and discoveries and learnings and teachings. And I just want to acknowledge you for being courageous and sharing this, especially because this is just not something that's commonly talked about. And I've spoken to so many entrepreneurs, I've coached so many entrepreneurs that they do have debt that's building. They do have these different things where they're like, putting on the good face, or the strong face, and everything in the background. There was a commercial growing up where it's a guy like on a lawnmower going around, and his family's happy, like playing in the pool, and he's just smiling, and he's like, my family doesn't know it, but I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. And he's just like driving on a lawnmower. And so, yeah, I just really appreciate you opening up and sharing this, especially since it's such a common thing amongst entrepreneurs, and people in business. And the fact that you had the perseverance to really reflect and look at these things and create solutions and receive the support that you needed along the way. To me, I think that's huge.
Appreciate that. And one thing I want to mention as well, I think a lot of people will connect with is, as you're building the business and your family members inevitably ask, like, how's business going? Like, they kind of ask that in the sense of like, they don't want any details, but of course we know all the details and we're like, oh, I can't share any of those with them. And we get kind of antsy. And so we want to be able to share good news with them all the time. And so what do we do at family dinner when we're sitting there and they're like, oh, how's your little repair shop doing? You're like, oh, we hired a third employee, you're like, right. I got to show it to them. And so you hire people with the intention, and you always speak in 6 months out. Like, that's whenever anyone asks, like, how are you doing? You're like, oh, we're doing fantastic, record months, but you're obviously not. But, you always speak 6 months out because you hope to have record months in 6 months. You hope to be able to utilize that employee that you're putting on payroll now, that you're paying their payroll with debt. You hope that in 6 months it'll pay off, and like everything's like a 6 month out. Everything's 6 months out. So yeah.
And what was there a particular moment or something that occurred for you that this started to, and it's okay if there isn't, but that you noticed this started really to shift, or it reached a certain point where you started to look at things differently, or you saw something differently?
I think after, so my all my employees walked out on me. So I had two store. It was when I had that second location. All employees walked out,
Mhm.
but I had there was one person on the team that totally it was a very obvious they didn't like me, and so they would say mean things to me like in store, and I just didn't really have the it. And I don't know why, but I just never wanted to actually fire anyone unless they did anything incredible. It had to be like blatantly wrong for me to fire someone. And so, despite like all the disrespect and stuff like that, I was like, "Oh, that's not enough. That's pretty thick skin." I was like, "Oh, it'll be okay." Um, but eventually, we had a group chat that we're doing, and then he had said something in there, and then he had responded and said, "That's why everyone's going to walk out on you." And I'm like, "Wait, everyone? Like, this is weird. Like, I don't like it. I thought two other people kind of liked me at least enough to not walk out." But after that happened, I remember asking them about it, and it was just like you could tell that it was like, "Yeah, we've been exposed. Like, we're all planning a walkout." And so they luckily they didn't all walk out just one day unexpectedly, but that was like the unexpected. Like within like 2-3 days they were all gone, and only one stayed for just a few months or a few weeks. But that was like when the writing was on the wall. I think for myself it had to be taken from me because I wasn't willing to accept it. Like I was just in complete denial. So like literally everyone walked out. But I think that was a really good thing because at the time, like, and there was a lot of like anger that happened after that. I was like, man, like how dare they? Like but like how dare I just like build a business and bring people into it without any structure? Like how dare I? Like so I started like change the narrative because I'm like it's my fault. Like I can't take responsibility for them stealing. I can't take responsibility for like their poor ethics, but I can take responsibility for the empowerment they felt while they were here. And I failed at that. And so I think that it's just inevitable. But I think from the very beginning, as far as bringing people on with the expectation they already know enough, when you try to train them, it creates just these abrasions that create mutiny, and eventually after a couple of years they get tired and burnt out from it, and then eventually they all want to walk out. But that was like the biggest thing for me is I was really mad at the very beginning. But one of my friends, he runs an event business, and he does like for the oil field here, and so he runs a couple of streets and has the local companies come and they do like fundraisers and all that kind of stuff. He'd actually come in the store and he's like, "Hey man, I was going to go to your other store." He's like, "How's it going?" I'm like, "It's not open." He was like, "Oh, why not?" And I remember telling him, I told him, I was like, "Oh, because employees sucked, all this kind of stuff." And he's like, "Oh, really? Okay. I guess some people can suck." Like he was just kind of like, whatever. And he's like, I guess, what's your takeaway from that? And I was like, "Oh, you just can't." And I told him, I was like, "You can't trust people. You can't bring people in as close as I did." Like I was still under the thing that I was not wrong at all. He's like, "You can't just bring people in too close. You got to keep them like, you have to have that barrier up." He's like, "No, you're wrong." I was like, "No, wait, I'm not." Like, and he's like, "No, you need to know them. Like, they spend more hours there with you than probably their own family at times." And it's like, it's your job to be their mentor. It's your job to be whatever. And I was like, dude, like, I was just thinking, I was like, I kind of felt stupid at the time. I was like, crap, I look like an idiot in front of this guy. And I was like, I don't understand what he's talking about. But literally a couple months went by and like it clicked. I was like, no, it wasn't like, it was 100% my responsibility to create the environment, because he had mentioned, he's like, we had this one lady who's working for us, single mother, couldn't afford, presents for her kid because she went through a divorce, all this kind of stuff. He's like, not to say you need to spend cash, like tons of cash on your employees, but like, he's like, I bought Christmas for her because, whatever. Like, he's like, my other employees have helped him out for whatever. I'm like, wait, and they don't take advantage of that. Like, and so the huge perspective, that was the big perspective shift at that point. But still, even at that point, I was massively in debt, but I wasn't even close to even thinking about like bankruptcy or anything like that. But that, kind of good perspective there. Like I wouldn't file bankruptcy at all, but
Yeah.
like at that point I was like, no. And that was the big thing that hit whenever he said that. He's like, you have to, like, you're their mentor. Like, I was like, I don't understand what that means. But a couple months down the road, I started to understand it. So.
Yeah. Wow. And so, yeah, are you open to sharing like what more of what came after that?
Yeah. So as far as like as far as the bankruptcy part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I imagine, that sounds like
Yeah.
that started to arrive.
Yeah. So it was kind of interesting because um the whole time I felt like I feel like I'm a very, very good technician. Like I can fix anything. Like I'm very, very, very good with things like that. But the whole like building team side, like I just kind of ignored the whole facet of it. But like I don't think I'm bad at it. I just don't think I put any attention into it for that amount of time. And so it came down to where somebody had mentioned, oh, a great book is E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I was like, oh, cool. So I got an Audible and listened to it. And literally, like, first chapter in, I was like, this is insane. Like, this is literally like recounting my past few years in business, like talking about Sarah with her bakery and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, no, like this is me, like 100%. And that's like when the big light bulb went off. I'm like, wait, I got to document stuff. I got to make all these things better. And so I remember, especially at that time when I started to read E-Myth, I was at the point in my business where I was like, you know what? I don't care about this place. I want this place just to, like, I hope that something comes in here and wipes me out of business. Like, that's what I was hoping for every single day. So for another time, I was like, I hope it gets taken away from me, right? Because I can't give it away. I'm too prideful for that, I guess. So so I read the book, and then I was like, wait, got to start making like these like detailed breakdowns of like the expectations of everything that needs to be done, because I'm very good as a technician to do that. I feel that everyone that I brought on, I've been able to train very highly in order how to do the technician side. But as far as how to run the business back end, like, we just never did that. And so I started to detail all those things, like how to talk with customers, like what to do in certain situations and all this kind of stuff. And literally carried a clipboard around and started making detailed notes of it all. And pretty soon my business was thriving. We're making a profit for once. And especially at that time, I was like, man, like, I don't want to be part of my business anymore at that time, because I was like, for one, like all the trauma from all the past like experience with all the employees walking out, like closing the second location, because I had to beg that landlord out of all that debt. I was like, I don't have like the $11,500 that you say I owe you. I don't have any of it. And so he was like, okay, cool, I'll just send you a letter saying we cancel the contract. We'll be good. I'm like, okay, thank you. But yeah, that was the big thing. And then, but it was out of need that I looked at my business. I was like, I don't really want to be here, but I don't want it to continue to get worse. I believe this Michael Gerber guy in this book. So I started documenting it literally as he did. And then pretty soon I saw that things were 1,000%, like being taken care of. Like one of my team members now, he worked for me at the time whenever he was just out of high school, brand new kid out of high school, super nervous. He'd only worked for me for like an hour or two a day. And the first month that he came on full time, he sold $4,300 worth of accessories, but it was because we built a really good system on what to say to the customers, because he was super, super terrified to talk with customers. And I'm like, I can't fail him. Let me like create a good system for him. So I wrote down everything he should say, how he should do it, how he should stand, which way he should turn, all this kind of stuff, and trained him. And he went out there from being terrified to then closing $4,300 worth of accessories, which is huge, because before, with 3 employees, the max we'd ever sold of accessories was $1,200 in a whole month. And all of a sudden, this new guy that's terrified and refusing to sell, I could assist 43. And so that was the big aha moment. But still, I was in debt massively, $7,000 worth of minimums that I was paying each month successfully. Luckily, my credit didn't get trashed during that, because I never defaulted on anything. I just paid them all off, or kept paying on them. But it's still $7,000. But at that point, my business, fast forward a couple of years, my business was fixed. It was working really well. Like, we're making a profit, but we were still having to pay all those credit cards. So like, that wasn't the profit, but the profit was there if the credit cards didn't exist. And everything the credit cards had bought, we no longer used in the business. Like, so the business didn't actually need that. So like, I started looking at the numbers. I'm like, this business actually works for the first time. Like, it's because of the systems. Like, I'm making a lot of really good money, but it's all being consumed by all my past years of mess up. And that's the point that it got me to bankruptcy. But yeah, that's kind of like a stop point there. But yeah, but that was up to that point until I, started to file bankruptcy, that, everything had turned around, everything was doing good, but there was just so much baggage that we couldn't grow from, that we had to get rid of it.
Yeah. And so it sounds like that helped you get rid of the baggage. And then it, well, even before that, it started really opening up and following that book, The E-Myth. So it sounds like for anyone watching, that's a book that they should check out for themselves, if they're finding, that they're experiencing anything related to that you spoke about, and that it really helped you train employees. It really helped you find a balance between how to be directive with them and train them without that feeling of that you're like bossing them around or something
Right.
like that. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. Like, it then took the dynamic of questioning what they did to then questioning your delivery of it at that, because once for anyone who hasn't read it, go read the E-Myth, because it'll change everything. Like, you'll look at it and then all of a sudden you'll blame yourself for everything. Something will go wrong. And instead of saying, why did they do something stupid? You'll literally ask yourself, oh crap, I let them fail. Where did I fail? Like, how did I cause that? How did I allow that to happen? And then you go fix it by creating a better system to then, basically have them succeed versus telling them they did wrong. It's like a whole different, it's crazy. But yeah, that was incredible, shifting everything at that point. And then all those things I looked at in business, I was like, employees aren't difficult to deal with. They're only difficult to deal with if you create a horrible environment for them to be in that they can't thrive in, and then there's the struggle, and it's all my fault. Like, it's very clear on the wall, like it was all me. But yeah.
Well, and number one, the book exists clearly because, you weren't alone in that experience, in going through that, because I think there's a lot of talented people who are talented at what they do. They're really skilled at their thing. And then there's this element of employees and business and training and mentorship that, when someone's monetizing their skill and they want to grow, there's only so much that you can do alone. And then it's this whole dynamic of other people. And if we know anything about life, it's that human relationships are often complicated. And so, it sounds like this was really helpful. And so could you share, as you introduce these things and you had, some of your highest months, what's changed for you since that past period of time? Because I know you have a program now, and you also you have your location as well. Are you open to sharing what's come of all these learnings that you've had?
Yeah, I think all the learning and perspective. Like, I remember hearing Russell Brunson talk about one of his podcasts about, like, he had reached out to a business mentor and talking with them, and then he talked about how he had struggles in business and he felt embarrassed about mentioning them. And then his mentor was like, no, this is good. He's like, this is good. I only work with people that have cycled. Like, and so, like, that was good perspective to me. I'm like, man, like, I'm not learning through theory. I'm not learning through whatever. I literally learned, like, for years, like, how to do it wrong. And, like, so it's like very, very ingrained in my head on, like, how not to do things. But now, literally, creating I would say, like, a system-centric organization, like, literally in my repair store, anything that goes on, if they're like, it's incredible. Like, I had literally Dennis, one of the guys that works here, he's worked for a long time. And he came up, he's like, hey, Ben, I was thinking maybe we can create a system for, like, whenever we have devices ready for pickup, that the way that we do it is this and this way because of this and this and this, because I find myself, having, these particular issues with it. Does that sound okay to you? And I'm like, dude, this is great. Like, that's amazing. Like, let's type it into our handbook, and that becomes the new standard for everything. And I'm like, and at that point, no one feels like they have to just guess. It's literally 100% complete transparent collaboration between each other. And you don't have that guessing game, because I think a lot of times there's a massive guessing game between employee and owner. And a lot of times, I've posted this before, but the owners of small businesses or any business in general, a lot of times doesn't know how they wanted the task done. They just know they didn't want it done that way. And I think that's a huge, like, thing to think about, is how often do we ever get mad at our team member? Like, why'd you do it that way? And it's like, how would you have done it? It's like, I don't know. I just know what, like, and you don't really know, like, what you would have done. You're just nitpicking on what they did. And you feel like you're justified because you're like, I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong. You did it a wrong way. But it's like, but you're not right either. You have no actual valuable input. I think a lot of people get stuck in that. But that was I think that's a big shift for me, is because then, building out my online programs, I look at everything now that it has to have the output. It has to have the output. Like, the output is the only thing that I want. So my online, my store now, I've kind of coined the phrase of, like, your repair shop is too complex, because a lot of times people bring complexity into their business to make themselves feel good. And it's not an output. It's only it's an input that they're doing. That complexity is an input, and it gets them no output. And I think that's the biggest thing now, is I'm like, hold on, I'm not going to look at any input that I'm doing. I only want to consider where's the next output that can happen, and what do I need to get that exact output. And that's, like, the equation that I just backwards engineered on. So, like, whenever I created ProFixer, where I literally just share my story with them about how I started a business, crashed, came back in business, and all the things that I learned, all the systems that I developed, like, that's been the biggest thing there, is seeing repair shops, literally, I think this is the validation factor. Like before I was like, I'm afraid to tell anyone any of this because I don't think anyone's experienced it. I'm a unicorn. That's what everyone always thinks. But whenever I started to share it, I got like unsolicited messages from people going, dude, like I'm literally in foreclosure on my house right now. I'm like, oh crap, like sharing really similar stories, or, oh dude, I've been in business for 2 years. I have 3 employees. I've never taken home a paycheck. And I'm like never? He's like, no, I just spend the business debit card like to barely. And it's like the perspective that it's given me is to understand the actual output. And so like whenever I look at life, I literally saw someone ask the other day, said, hey, I got $10,000. Where should I put it in my business? And I'm like, hold up, like that's the worst question to ask. Like if you had $10,000 cash, maybe you should go to Fiji for the next month and decide what you want your life to look like for the next 5 years and then come back. That'd be a really big return on investment. But like a lot of times we take this money and we go buy equipment. We go like increase our little sign in our store, or we buy all new computers because we can. I'm like, but where was the output? Would you have rather not bought new bicycles for your kids and then taken a whole week off and like biked around, wherever? Like, would you not rather done that? Or would you want to buy them a tree house for the backyard? Like, that's where I look at this stuff. And a lot of people are like, I reinvest my profits. I'm like, those weren't profits. If you had, like, you're not reinvesting by choice. You're actually, your business is consuming by need. So you had no choice. So like, it's just interesting to like have massive clarity in where I'm at now, because I don't spend a lot of money on my business. My business has its needs that are taken care of, but I don't just randomly say, oh, I have an extra $5,000. Like, where should I put? Like, no. Like, that $5,000 is mine. I'm going to take it and use it and, to enhance my life. Because that's the only reason I started the business, to enhance my life. And I think we get confused a lot of times because we look at the business as our life, when I'm like, hold on, the business isn't necessarily your life. The output of the business is. And there are a lot of, businesses that like, that is very meshing as far as between business and personal life and that kind of stuff. And so it could be, but you have to look at it. Is the business giving you opportunity? Do you feel like you have to be like, do you feel like it's dragging you down each and every single day? I think that's the biggest thing. Like, I choose to come to a business. Like, if I sit here for 40 hours in the week, I chose to do it because I could choose not to next week if I didn't want to. And that's the big thing with my business. It gives me availability to absolutely choose. And so now, like, I built my online business as well, ProFixer, which we literally train people on how to do advanced micro soldering plus develop systems, all in the same lines. Like, everything has an output. That's the only thing. And right now, like, we're totally killing the game, like with micro soldering in general, because we're all focused on the output. Like, and so like we want our students to get real results, real success. And like, we have people from other, it's funny, this is a whole off topic, but we have people from other training programs joining ours because they don't get results there. They have really good experiences. They have really good like reinvestment of profits there, but like they don't have any kind of output. And so that's like the big thing they come to us for. So it's like totally seeing everything come full circle has been really awesome. And like the past few years has been absolutely amazing in business. So, and life.
Cool.
Like,
yeah. I love it. And so, yeah, I think that's an amazing point where we get to, wrap this up. I love how you just really brought that home of, what was most helpful and where you're at now and what's changed, because, I think it gives people light on the other side, and the fact that you're even, receiving these messages from people sharing, where they're at and that there is another side to it that they get to experience, I think is amazing. And question for you, your program, is it specifically for people with micro soldering, or do you ever have a plan to open it up to people of different industries if they're dealing with similar things?
So yeah, so I do have plans to, so we have 2 specific programs. We have one for micro soldering, which we teach, bundled systems in there that are applicable to that. And then we have a whole other side, which is literally just business ops, like systems and processes and everything like that. That side of the business, the system side, is very, very universal to realistically anything. However, the language that we use in that, a lot of it is, coined around repair and all this kind of stuff. And so the verbiage is all catered to that. But we do have people that come in from, that aren't necessarily like repair shops. They kind of are, but we have a couple like game stores come in that are kind of like GameStops that do like console resale stuff. They've come in and had really great success implementing there. Also like more computer IT type businesses that don't do phone repair like we do. They come and had really good success. But yes, I do want to branch it out later on. But right now we're specifically repair shops. At least all the verbiage and stuff like that is. So that's kind of like a little bit of a hurdle for people to get over if they always see the verbiage being repair shop. But the principles are all very universal to anything. So
Cool. Thank you so much. And what would be your last words? Not your last words. I mean, it sounds like you're heading to the grave. What would you like to share with someone who may be listening and is where you used to be?
that's a really good question, because I got a lot of things that I can say, but I think the biggest thing is your business is a tool that you use to enhance your life. If your life is not enhancing, then your business is not, doing what it should be doing. And don't ever forget why you wanted to start a business in the first place. A lot of times people say, well, like they get into business because they want to have a bigger house. They want to, like, everyone talks about the cliche Lambo, like they want the Lambo, like all this kind of stuff. Like don't get so lost in the journey and then, just tell yourself those things aren't important anymore. Like, go after those. I mean, that's why you started the business. You wanted the business so you can work less hours and make more money. So like, if you're working more hours, making less money, then something is wrong. Admit to yourself and don't care what anyone else thinks. But, if it feels, it feels too complex, it probably is. And, business should be, something that pulls you in where you feel like you, go there to create an enhancement on your life. And that's been the biggest thing for me. Focus on the output, ensure that your business is a tool that you use to enhance your life, and make sure that you're 100% in on your personal life, 100% in on your business life. And that's the balance that I live now. So that'd be what I would say to everyone.
Yeah, and thank you. I think it's really important, especially what you shared, this idea of admitting certain things to themselves. I always love that phrase, like the truth will set you free. Because I think sometimes we think if we admit the truth, like that everything's going to crumble, but it's actually usually by accepting or admitting certain things that we actually are able to get to the other side. So
yeah,
thank you. Wow, I love this. So I really appreciate you sharing. And if anyone is looking for you, wants to find you, where should they check out your work and what you do?
Yeah, so you can connect with me on Facebook. Facebook is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me, but it's just Benjamin Rossow, Benjamin Rossow on Facebook. And so, cool. Yeah, I'm the guy with the profile picture with the 3 kids. So look for that one. So.
Awesome. And for anyone listening, if you're looking for more interviews like this, you can go to givememygoodies.com. And if you're interested in coaching, feel free to shoot me a message. I love this, Ben. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, appreciate you so much. Thank you for having me on.
You got it. Thank you, everyone. Bye.